The story takes place in Persia, 522 years prior to the birth of Christ. The scorching eastern sun lights up the royal palace of Susa, where young King Cambyses II, son and successor to the legendary Cyrus the Great, is about to deliver justice, brutal and symbolic. Before the assembled court, an old, trembling man awaits his fate. Sisamnes, a royal judge of Persia, will soon enter history as a warning, his punishment echoing through millennia to remind us of the dangers of judicial corruption. The screams that will soon fill the palace signify not only the end of a man, but also the beginning of a legend. The judge whose skin was flayed from his living body to upholster the chair that his own son would use to continue his legacy. How did a respected authority meet such a terrible fate? To understand, we must go back to the moment Sisamnes made the fatal mistake that sealed his sentence. In the vast Persian Empire, the greatest power of the ancient world, the judicial system was key to maintaining order across lands stretching from India to the Mediterranean. Royal judges held immense prestige, acting as the sovereign's direct agents of justice. Sisamnes had served for decades, settling disputes, judging criminals, and arbitrating conflicts between nobles and merchants. In a society where trust in justice was the backbone of political stability, judges were expected to be incorruptible. At least, that was the ideal. But reality was more complicated. Ancient historians, especially Herodotus, the father of history, tell us Sisamnes gave in to the corruption that often follows power. His downfall began with a territorial dispute between two Persian nobles. One, aware his case was weak, bribed Sisamnes with a large sum of gold to sway the verdict. Perhaps thinking the young King Cambyses, busy with military campaigns and consolidating power, would overlook this minor case, Sisamnes accepted the bribe and handed down an unjust sentence. No empire maintains greatness without an efficient information system. Sisamnes didn't know a scribe present at the trial was loyal to the nobleman wronged by the corrupt decision. That scribe collected evidence and brought it straight to King Cambyses, who had just returned from a campaign in Egypt. Cambyses II was no stranger to ruthlessness. Though his father, Cyrus the Great, was known as a magnanimous ruler for his time, Cambyses came to the throne determined to prove he could be even harsher. He inherited a colossal empire and was resolved to show that justice under his reign would be swift and exemplary. When presented with proof of Sisamnes's corruption, Cambyses acted immediately. He ordered the judge arrested and summoned the entire court to witness the trial. The message was clear. He who judges must also be judged, and no appeal would be allowed. They dragged Sisamnes into the great hall where the king presided. Witnesses spoke, and evidence was laid out. Confronted with the truth, the judge confessed. But his confession did nothing to soften the king's wrath. Instead, it confirmed that corruption had spread deep within the judicial system, a threat Cambyses intended to eradicate completely. The sentence came from the sovereign's lips: death by flaying. The public spectacle, rather than a private execution, aimed to educate everyone about the consequences of corruption. Yet there was a cruel twist, a lesson in political symbolism typical of Persia. Sisamnes's skin would be used to upholster the judicial chair where his son Otanes would sit as the new judge. On the morning of the execution, the palace courtyard was packed. Nobles, merchants, scribes, and foreign diplomats all gathered to witness royal justice in action. Sisamnes arrived in chains, his dignity crushed by the horror he knew awaited him. In the center of the courtyard, a wooden table stood surrounded by braziers, heating the executioner's tools. The Persian method of flaying was brutal but precise, not simply tearing off the skin, but doing so methodically, keeping the victim alive and conscious as long as possible and preserving the skin in one piece for later use. The executioners, experts in prolonging suffering beyond what seemed humanly bearable, began their work with clinical precision. First, incisions were made along Sisamnes's back, chest, and limbs. Hot water was poured over his skin to soften it and ease the procedure. Then, they carefully separated the skin from the flesh, inch by inch, using spatula-like tools. Sisamnes's screams echoed through the palace. Some witnesses fainted at the sight, others turned away, unable to bear it. But Cambyses remained impassive, watching the punishment he had ordered, making sure the message was clear. Persian justice would be incorruptible, or the price would be unbearable. The flaying could last hours. Death came only from shock, blood loss, dehydration, and hypothermia. Without skin, the body lost heat and fluids rapidly. According to Herodotus, Sisamnes remained conscious for much of his ordeal, and his suffering was intensified by the knowledge that his skin would serve as a permanent reminder of his crime. He carefully treated his skin with salt and preservatives after his death, tannizing it like animal leather. This human leather then covered the judicial chair where his son Otanes would now sit, taking up his father's role. The image defies modern sensibilities. A son forced to sit daily on his father's skin, administering the same justice his father had corrupted. But Herodotus notes that appointing Otanes was not gratuitous cruelty. In Persian tradition, important roles were often passed from father to son. Otanes was likely already being prepared to succeed Sisamnes. By placing Otanes in his father's seat, Cambyses turned punishment into a lasting lesson for the successor and all judges. The message was clear. Judicial corruption was not just a crime against individuals, but an attack on the empire's foundation. Always remember, Cambyses is said to have told Otanes at his investiture, upon what leather you sit when pronouncing your judgments. We don't know how Otanes handled this grim reminder. Herodotus mentions he eventually became a satrap in Ionia, suggesting he fulfilled his duties well. We can only imagine what ran through his mind each time he sat in that chair to deliver justice. The story of Sisamnes and his terrible punishment lived on, not only in history, but also in art. Nearly 2,000 years later, during the Renaissance, European artists rediscovered this tale and turned it into vivid visual works. The most famous is The Judgment of Cambyses, a diptych by Flemish painter Gerard David, completed in 1498. Commissioned by the aldermen of Bruges to hang in the town hall, it shows in graphic detail both the arrest and flaying of Sisamnes. It is worth noting that the choice of this theme to decorate a town hall was no accident. During the Renaissance, the story of Sisamnes was reinterpreted as a powerful warning about the dangers of judicial corruption and the necessity of honest magistrates. Places where judges and public officials worked often displayed representations of this story as a constant reminder of the consequences of corruption. Other artists also portrayed this theme. In 1617, William Isaac van Swanenburg created an impressive engraving based on a drawing by Joachim von Sandrart. It shows Cambyses ordering the flaying of Sisamnes, with Otanes seated on the chair covered with his father's skin. Even in the modern era, the story of Sisamnes retains symbolic power. In 2012, protesters brought reproductions of Gerard David's painting to a Moscow courthouse during the trial of anti-government demonstrators, sending a clear message about perceptions of judicial corruption. The execution of Sisamnes raises profound questions about justice, punishment, and the use of terror as a tool of governance. By today's standards, flaying is an unjustifiable cruelty regardless of the crime. Yet, in the ancient world, public executions served not only as punishment, but also as educational and preventive spectacles. Persian logic in this context had its own internal coherence. By transforming Sisamnes's body first into a spectacle and then into a functional object, the covering of a chair, Cambyses did more than punish one man. He created an enduring symbol. The chair upholstered with human skin became a permanent monument to the dangers of corruption and a daily reminder for all those who administered justice in the empire. This story also highlights how deeply ancient societies valued impartial justice. In a world without modern systems of checks and balances, the honesty of judges was crucial to the legitimacy of power. A corrupt judge harmed not only individuals, but also threatened the stability of the entire state. While the details of Sisamnes' story come primarily from Herodotus, who wrote his histories about 75 years after the events, there is reason to believe in its general authenticity. The practice of flaying as execution appears in multiple Persian and Assyrian sources, and the use of human skin for various purposes is documented across several ancient cultures. Moreover, the didactic and symbolic nature of the punishment fits what we know about Persian justice and royal displays of power. For a vast, multi-ethnic empire, public and memorable demonstrations of authority were essential tools of governance. Sisamnes's terrible fate remains one of the most vivid and disturbing examples of judicial punishment from antiquity. Whether considered a historical figure or a symbol, the flayed judge reminds us of the enduring ideals of impartial justice and of corruption as a fundamental betrayal of public trust. Today, judges thankfully do not sit on chairs covered with human skin. Yet the principle illustrated by Sesamnus's story, that corrupted justice deserves the severest consequences, continues to resonate, although it is now expressed through more humane forms of accountability. What is perhaps most disturbing about this millennia-old story is how relevant it remains. Whenever judicial corruption surfaces, the image of Sesamnus's chair with its macabre covering reemerges as a powerful metaphor for the social costs of compromised justice. Visitors to the Groningen Museum in Bruges, Belgium, can still contemplate Gerard David's masterpiece that immortalized this story. With its meticulous composition and graphic detail, the painting provokes discomfort and reflection, proof of the enduring power of this narrative. Sesamnus, the judge who was flogged alive and had his skin nailed to his successor's chair, provides us with a deeper understanding of the brutality of ancient justice. He holds up a mirror to examine our ideas of justice, corruption, and the sacred responsibilities entrusted to those who wield the power to judge.